Welcome to Positive Personal Power with hope, aspiration, and encouragement. Our goal is to build and enhance people's confidence and strength to handle life's challenges. Now, let me introduce you to your host, Nat Schooler.
Today, I'm very privileged to be joined by Kim Adele, and we're going to talk about moving beyond imposter syndrome. And welcome, Kim.
Hi, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So I've noticed you've worked at board level in FTSE 250s. You were head of sales for Sage and operations director at Barclays, and.
Yeah.
You know, I'm really interested to learn more about you, what you're doing now, and what drives you.
Yeah, thank you. So I've had quite I guess you would say, an interesting or an unusual career. So I actually started out as a hairdresser, and then I got I had to give that up through an illness, and I got a temporary 16-hour-a-week job at the Halifax many years ago, and spent the next 20 odd years in either financial services or IT software with the likes of Sage. And it didn't matter kind of what job I got. I was constantly convinced that they were going to find out. I remember getting my first board role and going, they're going to turn around one day and go, oh my God, we put the hairdresser on the board. That's awkward, get her off. And it kind of never happened. But you almost felt like you were living two lives, the one in your head and the one that you were projecting to the world. And I did that for like so many years. And then when I had my little girl, who's now 3.5, it was a really defining moment for me, because I had a really bad health scare, one I wasn't certain I was going to survive. And I went to write the letter to her that gave her all of the advice I'd wanted to give her in her life. And it's a tough letter to write, so I didn't know where to start. And I decided to go and look in on her. So I went upstairs and I stood looking at her, snoring away gently, dreaming about her day. And it suddenly hit me. And in that moment, I think the world stopped, but it probably was just my heart. I realised that the voice we talk to ourselves becomes the voice we teach our children to talk to themselves. And it broke my heart, because I don't want anybody to ever talk to themselves the way I've talked to myself. People think I'm a nice, kind, caring individual. I'm evil when it comes to myself. I can say some really mean things to me, but I would never dream of saying to anybody else. And I decided at that moment I needed to learn to not talk to myself that way, to not allow myself to do that, because it might leak out and she would be faced with that too. And I was fortunate, I clearly survived, I'm here. So it's become a kind of like life lesson. And I think, for me, that's what drove me, is there's so many people, so many brilliant people who do amazing things, who still have this fear. Everybody has a vulnerability about something, that thing that we hope no one's ever going to find out, that no one's ever going to notice. For many years, mine was the fact that I was a hairdresser and I had no qualifications. So now I share it with people. It's like, it is my biggest vulnerability, but I'm already less vulnerable about it because I've chosen to share it. And actually, imagine how great it would be if you realise that your vulnerability is actually your superpower. So the thing that made me a good leader was what I learned as a hairdresser, to really listen to people, to be interested in them, to try and understand what it is that they want, and then do your best to make that happen, which is actually the traits of being a good leader. And it became the thing that I'd hidden from for years. It's like, God, I hope nobody spots that I'm a hairdresser, really, because they will think I'm not bright enough. They'll think I'm not intelligent enough. They'll think, and you harp back to your childhood, to when you got things wrong, to when you failed. And yet, if you look at our early childhood, and Scott's a great example of this, she's 3.5, and her and the little friends, they fearless determination. They fail and think it's hilarious, and then immediately get up and try again. So why can't we live like that? Because we did, but we learned how to be fearful, and therefore we can learn how not to be. And if I can help just one person get out of their own way and stop having their joy stolen by their head, then actually that's a life worth living.
Fantastic. That's a really lovely story. I like the superpower bit. Actually, I've heard that before from somewhere, and I think that's completely true. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Like the things that you go through, really make you the person that you are. I mean, if they don't kill you, they make you stronger. That's kind of what I've heard. Yeah, you've probably heard that as well.
Absolutely. And I'm a big believer that everything in life is either a lesson, a blessing, or both, because we do, what doesn't kill us does make us stronger, because we've learned how to do it, and therefore we can share that with somebody who hasn't had to do it yet. So heaven forbid they get faced with it, they won't be fearful, because actually they'll have a way of coping. They'll have a way of moving that through. And I think I've lived a very blessed life, but I've also had I've had a few life plot twists, 3 divorces, a stalker, and 3 life-threatening illnesses. So, you've had a few bits to be lobbed at you to allow you to kind of go, okay, how do I cope with this? How do I get through? And actually reframing your thinking is an amazing thing to learn how to do, because you don't think you can survive, and yet here we are, still surviving. And you there is that day you wake up and all of a sudden it's not so big, it's not so daunting, it's not so scary, because something new's come along. And I think that's how we can help people.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, this show is all about that, and it's kind of our mission, really. We've got some other people involved and partners, and everyone wants to kind of help everybody else, and it's fantastic. So why does positivity matter to you?
Positivity gets us through anything, I think, because life can be really tough, but there's always a positive. Every day there's always a positive, even if it's just the fact that there's a new day. The fact that you woke up and you've got you've got an opportunity to have more time with the people that you love, to learn something new, to develop something. And I think, it's, as a human being, we love a label. Labels really help us, because then, we kind of know where we're going. And if we think about the current situation in the pandemic, we could say, I'm safe at home, or we could say I'm stuck at home. It's only one word different, but it's going to have such a massive impact on your psychology and how you feel and how you go about your day. So actually, if you can choose a positive mindset, when life throws a plot twist at you, you've got more resilience within which to deal with it than if you're already coming at it from a negative mindset. One of the things I do every day, so people that know me know this, is I use a quote every day. So I go and find one to choose my mood, because it helps me start my day in a positive way. Me and my little girl do that together. We have a couple of minutes of appreciation of, I don't know, anything. It can be anything. It can be the fact that, finally I woke up one morning without looking like the wild woman of Borneo. I mean, that's something to be appreciated. But it's kind of like looking at those things and saying, yes, things can have gone horribly wrong, but it won't be that every single thing went wrong. Something will have gone okay. And it's finding that in every day, because that gives us hope. And the only thing stronger than fear is hope. So we have to find it wherever we can, I think.
Fantastic. Yeah, I agree completely. And so what is your personal positive superpower?
My personal positive superpower is I can see good in everything. There is always something good. And even at those moments of real trauma in my life, I always knew that there was a positive. Well, it's like I know that I blessed because I've got great friends and family, and actually I might be facing this now, but I've had the benefit of them. And I guess you can choose to then think about what they'd say, even the people that unfortunately aren't with me anymore. It's like I can think, well, what would they say in this situation? And actually it gives you back that memory, and the memory gives you I guess that positive injection to allow you to just feel that you can tackle anything, that there's nothing that you can't do, because actually all we've got to do is not see. I think it's Michael Jordan that says you don't need to see the whole staircase, you just need to take the next step. And I think every step we take changes our vantage point, and something that we couldn't see before, we can now starts to come into sight. And I think it is that ability, I guess, to just keep moving forward, even when people are like, seriously, do you not just want to just take a day off and go and sit under a duvet and feel sorry for yourself? And it's like, no, because I'm not guaranteed tomorrow. Only the present is your guarantee. So we've got to make the most of it, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I have a bit of an imposter story, as well, actually. Yeah. So when I was at school, I got expelled from one of the best boarding schools in the United Kingdom. I'd only been there 11 months, and I was getting bullied and so hanging out with the wrong people and this kind of stuff. And then I ended up in the only boarding school the only private school that would take me in the whole of the UK, right? My parents were livid. They nearly killed me. Like it was awful. Yeah. It was only for drinking. I mean, we were only drinking, right? My dad ran a winery. Yeah. So I grew up with alcohol everywhere. I mean, we had unlimited supply. Yeah. And
sounds amazing.
It was great. But when I arrived in my next school, I had this English teacher, and he would tell me that I'd be cleaning toilets, and that's what he would say to me in every English class. So he basically, rather than him encouraging me to write anything vaguely legible, I just misbehaved, and then at the age of 35, I thought, right, I'm going to start writing. I want to learn how to write. And I basically taught myself how to write. All right, my grammar is still pretty bad. My business partner, Mike, gives me grief about it all the time. Yeah. But however, and then after maybe, I think probably 3 or 4 years, IBM hired me to write blogs for Think Marketing, which was their site that they had at the time. And at that point, I was like, right. That's like a moment in time where I've closed off this situation that has been created, from the past. So it was almost that magic moment where you say, but I still get grief from my grammar, like I say.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing. I think interesting you say about kind of getting bullied and being in with the wrong crowds, and I think we learn our imposter, and we create it over time, and actually it's usually a voice from our past. So at the point that we're criticizing ourselves, it will be because of something that happened in the past. It might be when a parent had been critical, or when you'd not achieved something that you wanted to achieve, or the peer pressure when we were at school, or even sadly, there's a lot of bullying in workplaces, and it's people's fear. So actually, people don't try and hurt you on purpose. They're just dealing with their own pain, and they don't even think about you. You become collateral damage, because the one thing that is true is pity loves a party. So if I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable, I don't want anyone to know that I'm uncomfortable or I'm fearful. So I'm just going to point the finger at you and direct everybody's attention your way. Now, I honestly say I wouldn't do that, because actually bullying is one of my hot buttons. I don't understand why we can't be more inclusive of each other. But when I see people that have bullied, that's been what they've been doing. They've been trying to protect their own pain and divert attention somewhere else. But all they're doing is passing the damage on, because people then later on in life, they kind of get a little bit fearful, and it'll be that voice that comes back. I don't want to feel like that again. I don't want to be in that place where I felt different, where I felt that I stood out for the wrong reasons. And we think that little voice is there to keep us safe. But actually, it's just our inner child desperate to not be unincluded. And we're now adults. So we have to, as the adult, make sure our inner child feels safe, and actually choose not to listen to our childhood memories in creating our future. And I think for me now, being a mum, I'm really careful and really conscious about everything I say to her, in case I'm going to be a voice in her future, and I want to make sure it's a positive one, and that it's not, if she got something wrong, it's an accident. Accidents happen, we learn from them, because we won't do it again next time, rather than being critical. And it's hard because we all have those moments where, like, really, I've got to mop that up again. I'm late, we could do with going somewhere. But I think it's it is something that becomes part of our internal dialogue, and the person we don't ever get away from is ourselves. That voice that's going around our head constantly is always there. And actually what we have to do instead is reframe our thinking. So first, you've got to acknowledge it. You've got to acknowledge whatever it is that the little voice is trying to say. And then ask, whose voice is it? Because it will always take you to whatever feeling it was that you wanted to avoid, because that's what it's there for. Our brains are like, 2 million years old, and they were designed to keep us safe from like dinosaurs and all things that were much bigger than us, and we were prey. So our fight or flight mentality is still there, and that's what ticks in. So that's what hits our psyche, which is, I don't want to feel vulnerable. I don't want to feel laughed at or incompetent or a fraud or found out. So then you've got to ask yourself, well, why do you think that they'd find out? What is it exactly? What are the facts, and what am I making them mean? So I'll share. When I was at Sage, and I was their head of sales. I won Leader of the Year. And I was a massive imposter. I was convinced I was hopeless at my job, and that I couldn't succeed. And I was very fortunate. They got me my very first coach, my very first external coach. And he sat down with me and he said, Kim, can you tell me, clearly you don't think you're doing a very good job. I went, no, I'm hopeless. I'm utterly hopeless. He's like, right, okay, what facts have you got about that? I went, well, I haven't really got any facts. It's kind of more of a feeling. I just feel that they're going to find out. And you look at all of them, they all look so corporate and so well pulled together. And I'm kind of a little bit like a hyperactive puppy dog. I'm not really sure that I'm what they were looking for. And he went, okay, are there any facts that you might be good at your job? No, none. It's like, none. It's like, no, can't think of anything. And I genuinely couldn't. I'd really got myself into such a bad place that externally to the world, I was still turning up, still smiling, everything was still going okay. But inside, I was crucifying myself. So he said, can I give you a few facts? And I was like, yeah, please. And he went, so you've just hit your 4th quarter of double-digit growth. And I went, well, yeah. He said, you've got the most engaged department in the entire organisation. In fact, your engagement scores are greater than the 5-year goal for the employee surveys. And I was like, yeah, no, that's true. It's a fair point. You won Leader of the Year. Yeah, I did. Yeah. He went, based with these facts, do you still think you're hopeless at your job? And I was like, well, okay, when you put it that way, clearly there's the odd thing that maybe I'm not that horrendous at. But it gave me a really good lesson, which is what I had to do was, when I'm saying to myself, I can't do this, and our subconscious brain is the happiest little helper you will ever have in your life. Whatever you tell it, it will go and find for you. So when you say to it, I'm not good at this, it will go and find all of the examples where you're not good at it. So what you have to then do is go, okay, interesting. So again, I remember when I talk about public speaking and doing things like this, I go, I'm really bad at it. And that's because my little subconscious happy friend goes and finds the fact that 20 odd years ago now, I stood up in front of 480 people when we were launching a charity credit card and told them that Imperial Leather was one of the charities that we were going to support. And immediately went, I meant Imperial Cancer, because Imperial Leather is clearly a soap. And in my head was like, oh my God, silly woman, how on earth have you stood up here and told people that Imperial Leather was a charity? So little voice going on. And then what I now have to say so I go, okay, so I get it wrong sometimes. I say really stupid things. Are there any examples of where I get it right? And actually, I've done public speaking now for years and get invited to these things all the time. So it's like, okay, so I can get it right. So I can get it wrong, but I can get it right. So actually, what am I going to do with this new fact base? Because our subconscious brain will have gone and found that for us. And then for me, it's my little girl. So for me, it's Scarlett. But we've all got somebody that means the absolute world to us, the person that's the most important. So the next thing that I do is I say, if this were Scarlett, what would I say to her? Now, I think, like any biased mother, that as long as she is kind and she tries, there's nothing in the world that little girl can't achieve. So I would say, just try, darling. What's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is that you will learn something new. Either a way not to do it, or you'll learn that you can do it. either of those is a brilliant lesson. So, just go and try. And what I now do is I force myself to take the advice I would give her. So I force myself to go, do you know what, as long as you can ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen and can I live with it? Because, for me, as long as the worst that can happen isn't I'm going to die, then I can probably live with it. so you can work through those. And I think it's just helping. What people try and do is push the voice down and ignore it. And, I hear people talk about the fact that they've totally overcome it. Personally, I don't think you ever totally overcome it. That little voice has been with us for too long. What you do get to do is recognize when it's trying to gain control, and you get to take control back. You get to go, look, that's very kind. It's nice of you to raise that I've got it wrong before now, but are there times that I've got it right? Little subconscious brain now wanders off and goes and gets you with things that you got right. And they go, great. So I know that I can get it wrong, but I can get it right. And I'm just going to try my hardest and see what I learn. And it is a really good way of kind of just regaining some control. And I think, I did a speech before lockdown, and in that moment stood on this stage, standing room only, all these faces looking at me, and I thought, I want to run away. And I clearly can't. But so I actually turned around to the audience and said, do you know what, right now, every fibre of my body is telling me to get off this stage and run as fast as my legs can carry me. And I can't do it for two reasons. One, I don't think I can run very fast in these shoes. And two, it'd be really embarrassing. I'd never be able to come back from it. And you'd all be stood looking at an empty stage going, what on earth just happened? And why did we bother coming here for the day? I said, so I can't do it. But what I can do is give myself permission to share with you that that's how I feel. And in doing so, quieten the little voice so I can remember what I'm here to talk to you about, and I can get on with the speech. And I had that many people come up and talk to me at the end, because they were like, you look like you're so confident, that bright red dress, big smile on your face. You looked like nothing bothered you. And yet in that moment, we all knew you meant it. And I said, yeah, that's because so many of us, everybody has a vulnerability. We have the thing that we hope no one's going to find out about, the thing that, that we're fearful of. I spent 40 odd years, my fear was that people would find out I was a hairdresser, that I'd only got an MVQ in hairdressing. I had no A-levels, I had no degree, I had none of the things that they were looking for in the type of jobs that I'd got, and that that they would find that out, and all of a sudden I'd be catapulted back to what I was doing before, until I realised it became my superpower. It became the thing that actually taught me the most, which was listen to people, really try and understand them and what they're looking for, what's important to them, and then leave them better than you found them. Because that, I believe, is the role of every human being, is for us to listen to each other, to understand each other, and to try and leave each other better than we found them. Because if we all did that, wouldn't the world be a nice place?
Yeah. I agree completely. That's one of my principles as well. Always try to leave people better than you found them. It's a no-brainer. Yeah, it's a shame not everybody does it, really. So
absolutely,
that's very interesting. So so you've kind of talked through how people move beyond it, right? Like it's about talking to that subconscious part of you, which is the inner child, right? I mean, I've spent a bit of time working with a hypnotist called Jonathan Chase, and so he basically was Britain's leading hypnotist, and he would stand on stage and he's hypnotized mass groups of people. And he talks a lot about the subconscious mind and the inner child, which is like the 9-year-old child who is actually very smart. Yeah. That inner child is very smart. And, and he talks a lot about that. So it's very interesting what you're actually saying. Very, very interesting. So let's see, we've got a few questions here from people. I think at the end we should certainly talk about how people avoid relapsing. But you've sort of covered a bit of that already, haven't you? So, Mike Briarcliff, he says hello, by the way, but also,
oh, bless him, hi, Mike.
Also he says, how do you cope with it? I mean, you've kind of talked around that, but what do you do to elevate your self-esteem? Is his question.
It's a great question. Thanks, Mike. So I think for me, there was it's about sometimes externalizing it. So I suddenly realized that inadvertently I was being hugely disrespectful. So when people gave me compliments, so it's a gentleman called Paul Stobart was the CEO at the time, and he gave me Leader of the Year for Sage. Amazing guy, a really inspiring leader, one of the best leaders I've ever worked for. And he gave this amazing speech about why I'd got it. And because my inner imposter was in such a place, I didn't really listen to any of the compliments and just went, they must have been making a point, or perhaps they just needed to give it to someone. I mean, I completely belittled that it wasn't about me. And then he rang me up after I'd left and gave me more amazing feedback. And I've worked for him a couple more times. And I suddenly realized that actually I was deciding that my own opinion that I was rubbish was more important than people like his opinion that I was good. I was like, well, I don't think my opinion's better than anybody else's. In fact, I don't rate my opinion very much at all, which is all part of my imposter. So why am I choosing to allow my own opinion to be greater than all of those people that are telling me that I'm good at this or I can do something? So actually, one of the ways that I try and overcome it is capturing when people have said that you're good at something and it was really hard to do. And they say you're good at something, or they give you a compliment, to just say thank you, full stop. Because actually we immediately try and belittle it, don't we? It's the I was on a call earlier with the fabulous Caroline Rice, and she said she calls it like the Primark brush off, which is like somebody gives you like an amazing compliment, like yeah, that looks amazing. You go, oh, it's just a £5 from Primark, because you kind of almost want to not be too ego, but in doing so, what you're doing is belittling their feedback.
Right.
So for me, there was a great way of kind of building my self-esteem is choosing to borrow their belief. So actually, I might not believe in myself, but they believe in me and I believe in them. So I'm going to borrow their belief and try and live up to what they've asked me to do. And borrowed belief can be such an amazing gift to give people. And it's a great gift to receive. I mean, I've seen it done when I ran big sales teams. I remember, on our last day, and we'd got a massive target to hit, and I owned 80% of the UK's target. So if I missed, we all missed. Everyone was like very nervous about it.
Wow.
We kind of went in on the Friday going, we've got a mountain to climb, but if I start thinking it's a mountain to climb, we're never going to get there. So I did a shout out to the team, and I genuinely believed every word that I said to them. And I said, I believe that if there's any good karma in the world, we're going to achieve it because we're doing the right thing. We've been doing the right thing all along. We're putting the customer first, and we're making sure that we're only providing solutions where customers need them. And we haven't deviated from that. We've kept going strong. And I also believe that if any team can achieve it, it's this team. We work together, we're collaborative, we're cohesive, we know what we're doing. So borrow my belief. If you haven't got your own, borrow mine until you find your own, because I believe we're going to do this. And I probably did the shout to them every couple of hours. And by the afternoon, I'd got the entire exec coming down to watch. I was like, yeah, no pressure, thanks for this. But we had the most amazing day. We had the biggest day on record. We didn't just hit our number, we annihilated it. And by the afternoon, people were coming up and going, I've got my own belief now. And it was amazing to see, and the energy in there. But it was that piece that said, actually, sometimes all we need to do is borrow some belief. And if we can't find our own, borrow it from somebody that we trust. If someone's asked you to do something, is that somebody that you trust and respect? And if so, just take the risk and do it, because they believe in you, and you'll get to the other side of it and you'll get your own belief.
Super. I'm doing it.
It's a bit like kids, isn't it? It's like that piece where they go, me do. I mean, she's only 3. But that sense of pride when me do becomes me did, when they realise that actually, that determination was worth it. And I think for me, it's fascinating. If I said to you all that tomorrow you're going to wake up and you're going to have to learn how to eat and walk and talk and run and dance, you'd be overwhelmed. We all would. And yet the reality is we've all learned how to do that at the most vulnerable point in our lives, when we couldn't really do anything for ourselves. We found the determination and the courage to not be afraid to fail, to just keep going, to just keep trying until we achieved some of the most amazing things that we now take for granted. And I think we sometimes forget that, but it's trying to go back and remind ourselves.
Yeah. I agree, but so you've covered quite a lot of these questions. Actually, I mean, you had so many questions, been a bit overwhelmed. Really, I collated them all, and we discussed them prior and everything. And I think Terry Brown, she has an interesting question because she's just published a book, and she's becoming quite well known. I think for writing
book.
this, for writing this book, and so people are approaching her for interviews and signatures on the book and everything. And so she says, how do you stop it from stealing your enjoyment when you achieve something you've worked hard at and it keeps telling you it was too easy? You didn't earn your stripes getting it and you don't deserve it, is what she said, which I found quite interesting, actually.
Yeah, it's funny because we all have a natural talent, and we never admit it because that feels really egotistical, and we all know that ego is a dreadful thing. We have that thing that we can do that's easy. So for me, it's talking to people. It doesn't sound like much of a skill until you see people that can't do it. You see people that just get stopped going, can't possibly say hi unless they don't say hi back. And it's like, they don't say hi back, it says more about their manners than yours. It's like, just say hello, people like. But I think it's looking at those parts that say, it probably wasn't that easy to do. It's because you've now done it. And actually, if you think about how long you thought about it, how many hours you poured into it, how much of yourself you have been willing to put out there, that keeps you vulnerable. And it's that piece that we're still afraid of. That piece that says, actually, we've put a bit of ourselves out there. And what if people aren't kind to it? What if people don't like it? And I think, as an English person, I spent years trying to be everybody's cup of tea, which is hilarious because the English could argue about how we take our tea as much as we could about politics and religion. So, I mean, talk about give yourself a goal you were never going to achieve. But then I found this other quote, which I quite like, which is, I'd rather be somebody's shot of whiskey than everybody's cup of tea. And I guess from that, what I mean is we'll all be right for somebody, and we'll have other people that don't like it, and it's like, that's fine because they can choose to move away. But I think you've got to write down, and actually what I do myself, and I do it with my clients, is get them to start doing every day a couple of things where somebody said something nice to them, whatever it is. If somebody said that was good, that was nice, write it down, and then write down anything that you've learned for the day. And it can be, I've learned something that didn't go as well, so I'd like to do it better next time. Or it can be, I learned that actually I tried something and I can do it. Because all of that starts to build up, and there's something about physically writing it down that hardwires into your subconscious brain. And it's giving them memories. So if you think about your subconscious brain almost like being the librarian, so you've got an entire world of information that's available to you, but your subconscious brain needs to know what's important to you for it to go and get it. So the more that you write these things down, the more you start to program it to see the positives, because you're choosing to see the positives. Because our subconscious filters out noise. Our conscious brain can only deal with between 7 and 9 things. So if we had all that noise going on, we'd never do anything, would we? But our subconscious brain has always got our back. We'll all have had those moments if we drive cars where we've turned up on our drive at home and gone, I don't really remember the last 3 minutes. Not really, but clearly we were fine and we did it. That's because our subconscious takes over. So you've got to practice really retraining it about what's important to you. Because if you've constantly told it that you're not good enough and that you're going to fail, that's what you've told it is important, because your subconscious brain doesn't understand the difference between positive and negative. Okay. Scientifically, it just doesn't. So it just goes to find what you want. It doesn't realise that you're harming yourself. So when you keep saying, I'm not good enough, it goes and finds you all those great examples because it's a happy little helper. It just wants to do what you've asked it. Train yourself to ask in the positive. And I think this is true. This is true not just of us as individuals, but in organisations. How many places have you seen that talk about minimum standards? I mean, so you get to the end of the day, I've worked really, really hard, and I get to come home and go, hey, Scarly, guess what? Today, mummy was absolutely minimum. It's not really the greatest feeling in the world, is it? Whereas if instead we set our goals in the positive, we could say, look, we've got standards of excellence. We just refuse to accept anything less. but same person, same day, get to come home and go, hey, I was excellent today. It totally changes our psyche. So I think the more that we can practice positive psychology on ourselves, the more we're able to stop it stealing our joy. And think, you know, for all those people, and Terry, and for everybody else, for all those people that are enjoying what you do, that are choosing to tell you that you're doing good, accept it, because it's a gift. Think for yourself. When you tell somebody else something that you appreciate about them, you feel good, don't you?
Yeah.
But then equally think, if that person immediately turned around and went, I don't need your compliment. Nobody'd ever do that. But if they did, think how you would feel. And the reality is, every time that somebody gives us a compliment and we choose not to accept it, we're basically saying, I don't want it. It's not good enough. And that's a great way of retraining yourself, because we'd never be that rude. We would never knowingly do that to somebody, but we're inadvertently doing it. So instead, go thank them, write it down and really own it, acknowledge it, and say, for that person, I made a difference. And that's all I need to do, is keep moving forward, because for that person, I left them better than I found them.
It's great when people give you a compliment. It is fantastic, the feeling. But I used to be a bit. It's a bit funny in the first place because you're not used to receiving them, perhaps, yeah. And then when you receive them, they start more come. You know, like I had someone tell me that my podcasts were better than TED Talks, and I was like,
brilliant.
Yeah. But I was so grateful. Like I was just like, really? Thanks so much. That means everything to me, you know, and it's a fantastic feeling.
It's capturing that, so that the next time you doubt yourself, you can go back and go, remember how it felt. That's why I say about own it. Remember how it felt, what it sounded like, what it smelt like. Really make it a memory, because that's going to be something in your positivity armor that will help at the moments that you've got doubt.
Yeah. I did that with my LinkedIn award. I took a video. Yeah. I got this award from LinkedIn, this massive thing. Yeah. In a box. And I was like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get my big hunting knife out and cut the bow off, and then say, thanks, LinkedIn. It was hilarious. And it feels really good. Even just thinking about it now, I threw it in the bin because it was too heavy, and it basically had my name started to rub off because I moved home a few times, and I was just sick of moving this thing around. But I've got the video, right?
Forever there.
Yeah. So let's see. We've got. I think you've covered pretty much everyone's questions. I don't think we've left anything out except for Jason Mitakidis. He says, it's quite a big question. He says, is there an existing explanation from the field of psychology for this? Is it related to feelings of guilt or lack of confidence, or feelings of inadequacy, or knowing it wasn't earned, or possibly something else? Likely a lot of overlap, he says. Yeah,
and there is a lot of overlap. I mean, they talk about it from a psychology point of view, it being known as the imposter phenomenon or imposterism. And it's basically a psychological pattern where individuals doubt their accomplishments and talents and have a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud, is how they describe it. But I think it's been true of so many people. So people that you might not think have it. So Einstein, as an example, had imposter syndrome. So there is a quote of his which says something along the lines of, and forgive me, I might get it slightly wrong, the esteem within which my works are held leaves me feeling like an unlikely swindler. And I wonder, we talk about labels, and we mentioned this at the start, I wonder whether or not it really is imposter syndrome, or whether or not in actual fact it's the symptom of being an insecure overachiever, because you can't feel fraudulent until you've achieved something. It's the fact that you've got there. And is it just you're a little bit insecure about the fact that you got there because you weren't 100% certain you could get there when you set off? And therefore that's the piece that fuels it. And I think it's then sometimes it's getting to that place about externalizing it, finding a safe space where you can have a conversation and get somebody else's point of view. I've got a couple of groups where people just come along and say, today's a really bad one. I did an article recently and was stunned by some of the people that I know who got in touch to say, oh my God, you nailed it. I felt just like that. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't think you doubted yourself for a moment. You know, you're one of the people I aspire to be like. So we don't know what's going on in other people's world. And I think that's the piece. We live in a despair and compare society. And we only post up the most perfect images of ourselves. So, you know, funny enough, we don't post when I've burnt dinner or the no makeup selfie when I've been up all night with Scarlett. Nobody needs to see that. To be fair, I mean, just being kind to the world, not sharing that. But because of it, what we do is we see these sometimes airbrushed views of what people's lives are like. And then we look at our own messy and complicated life and find ourselves lacking. But the reality is that's not real. That is just moments taken at their best. And what we've got to do instead is try and create our own photo book in our minds of when we were at our best, and recognize that, you know what, we all have an off day. We'll have a day where our hair didn't go so well, or we said something stupid that didn't go down well, or we got something wrong. But I think the reality is it's not the mistake that defines us, it's what we do with the mistake. It's the lesson that we learn. And as long as we keep learning, and as long as we're willing to go back and say, do you know what, yeah, I got that wrong, but I now know how to get it better. Nobody's ever going to hold you back as a result of that, because if we don't take risks, we're not moving forward. And I think for me, it's the more things that we can do to give ourselves the opposite point of view. So whenever we're thinking about something negative, say, what alternatives are there? Because I promise you, your subconscious brain will go and find them for you. There is a psychological trick, and I promise it works, albeit you'll feel a bit crazy when you do it. Okay. If you've got a problem that you are really mulling over and you just can't find a way through, you write it to yourself, and it's a psychologist told me this trick, they've been using it for years. You write it to yourself as a question. So you frame it as a question, you write it in a notebook, and you put the notebook on the side and walk away, and trust that your subconscious brain is dealing with that for you. And you go back, and I think the psychologist says it normally is somewhere in the region between 7 and 9 days. But you go back, you open the book, and you read the question out aloud. And in doing so, it triggers your subconscious, and all of a sudden the problem that's eluded you, well, it'll give you the answer, because it's been working on it in the background. So I sometimes use that on things where I know I've got something coming up and I'm like, oh, I'm really nervous about this. Write down this bit, and it always works. It always comes back and gives me the confidence, I guess, that I've done some of these things in the past and I can do them. And I think the other thing is to recognize it never goes away, and knowing that it never goes away, but that you can control it. It's not something to get past. It's something to come to terms with, and then choose to not let it take control, because you're now the adult to your inner child, and all they really want, just like they did when they were a child, is to be looked after and be secure. And if you step into your adult and say, it's okay, we've got this, hold my hand and we can do it together, then actually you'll move them into a more positive place, and they will quieten a lot quicker.
Wow, that's deep. It reminds me, I had NLP therapy probably seven years ago, six years ago, and in that process we kind of went back to when I felt that emotion for the first time. It was like a whole day, private full day. I was exhausted at the end, but actually we went through a very similar methodology, which is go back to the first emotion that you feel, why you felt it, and then what lesson that you're holding on to that pain for, it needs to be learned. And it's almost like the same, it's basically talking to your inner child and saying, well, why are you hanging on to this feeling? And it's like, oh, well, because you need to learn to be patient was one of my lessons that I learned. And it's just like, it's the funniest thing that it hangs on to these things, and it stops you from achieving what you want to achieve and feeling happy, right? So until you get to that point where you can face up to it and you can nurture it, right, into doing the things you want it to do, you're fighting one way and your subconscious is doing the other, and you wonder why all these things happen to you. And then you complain even more about how awful they are, when all you need to do is say, it's okay. Sometimes things go wrong. Yeah. Man up or woman up to it and just get on. Yeah. Get on with it, you know? So
yeah, and I think it's absolutely, you're so spot on. I mean, a lot of what I do with my clients is help them go back and find where the moments of trauma are. Where have these things hit you in your psyche that are creating the character that you're becoming? Because once you can understand them, we have like 2 or 3 default sentences that we learned through our lives, usually up until the age of 21, but there's key moments across that piece. One of mine was, I'm not good enough, and it's been, I lived it. I used it almost against myself all of the time. But once you realised where it came from and actually really dig into what actually happened in that moment, and then what did you make it mean? Because the facts and the meaning are usually different. And it's the meaning that we carry on and we take into our future rather than the facts. And I think once people can kind of do that, it doesn't mean to say, a good friend of mine, Sally Emerson, says, it doesn't mean to say you don't get triggered, but it means you recognise you've been triggered and you move, because you go, I don't want to be in that place, I'm going to be somewhere else. And that's, I guess, the same as you've done, Nathaniel, with the NLP piece, is recognising it and then going, oh, right, okay, it's there. I'm choosing a different response, because I've now been able to retrain myself to know that there's an alternative.
Yeah, well, I think working with hypnosis and really helped me a lot, actually. That was, and now I do that to myself. So I've gone through this process of like the perfect day, where I write down what my perfect day is, and I put that in a book, and I never look at it now. But basically, I write myself a Christmas card now every year, and I open it at the end of the year, and I'm like, oh, there's that Christmas card to myself. So it's like, oh, you did really well this year. You've done this, you've done that, you've blah, 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 and list all the things that I want to achieve in that one year or complete. And actually that's sort of doing that really started a great process for me, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great thing to do. What an amazing way of doing it. I mean, one of the things I get people to do is, if they say I'm going to achieve this in the next 3 months, is to get them to write how proud they are of themselves in a letter and self-address it and give it to me. And then I post it to them in 3 months' time.
Oh, cool.
Because actually suddenly getting it through your letterbox in your own handwriting freaks you out ever so slightly. You're why have I written to myself?
Of course.
But then there's that whole sense of like achievement, because you kind of get there and you get that whole, this is what it felt like. This is, and it feels even more amazing. And actually I'm learning to now acknowledge myself, and having come from a place where I doubted and disliked pretty much every part of me, being able to do that and helping others to do that is actually it's a really nice feeling, isn't it? When
it's amazing. It must be amazing. Right. Yeah, to help all of these executives and really, really serious business people to overcome that. But doing that whilst you're still feeling slightly like that yourself is quite amazing. Yeah, because you must have to sort of trigger certain patterns or shut them down quite regularly. So it's really about being very conscious, isn't it, of what's going on, instead of just the kind of autopilot that a lot of people live on,
It is. It's about being. So I guess normally, we go through training, and you say, you start off, you're unconsciously incompetent because you don't know what you don't know, and then you become consciously competent because you're very clear that you know, but you need to take certain steps. And mastery is when you become unconsciously competent at it. And I'm not there. I mean, often I can do it without thinking about it, but I guess for me the key skill is about being present in the moment. So when I'm with my clients, I am very present with them, and it's about them, not about me. So every time it kind of starts up, it's like, this is not your counselling session.
Of course.
So you can pipe, right? This is about them, and actually my interest is in them totally. And I can empathise because I know what it's like. I know what it's like to be there, doing the big job, having the board and the culture of the environment, having to make big decisions, run horrendous things like redundancy programs, whilst feeling self-doubt.
Yeah.
And yet you still have to go and do it. You still have to turn up, because that's the other thing about imposter syndrome is, although you fear it, you also fear, because you so fear being found out, you can't possibly not turn up. So So you kind of end up almost being on a double-edged sword, which is I'm going to force myself to go in and do this, even though I don't think I can do it. But I don't want them to find out. They'll definitely find out if I don't go. So it's the kind of like crazy self-talk that I have. And when I talk to clients, they're like, oh my God, yeah, that's it. And I was like, and that's why I guess I can help them, because almost you've got to have been there and understood it to be able to help explain how seemingly unexplainable it is, if that makes sense. Do you ever feel like this? And they're like, yeah, oh my God, yeah. It's like, that's perfectly fine. That's absolutely normal.
Yeah.
And it's around saying, it's recognizing it, accepting it's normal, and then moving through it. So I think, often, and we, I see a lot on social media and that, where people are like, well, how can anybody possibly do this if they've got that themselves? Well, actually, they know more about it than somebody who doesn't. And that's the truth in life. We look at these amazing people who really inspire us. But if they're like unobtainable, if they're like so amazing that we're like, well, we could never be like them, then we can be inspired by them, but we can't change our behavior. Whereas if we can find someone who's 2 or 3 steps further along than we are on the same journey, we can learn from them, because we can go, well, they're doing better than I feel I'm doing. I'd like to be on the same step as them. And I guess that's the piece. Then once you get to that step, they're looking, you look for the person who's 3 steps ahead of you, and you go and learn from them. And I guess, for me, life is a lifelong lesson. So I'm a big believer in coaching. I have a coach as well as I coach other people. And some people are like, why do you do that? It's like, because I can't tell my clients that it's all about self-development and always learning if I'm not choosing to walk the walk. It's like I have to do it myself to say, look, I believe it. I might have all these qualifications, which I have now around coaching what I do, but I still want to learn more. I still want to learn new techniques, because it might be something that helps me help another person. Mm-hmm. And therefore it's kind of like it's saying, if learning is a lifelong lesson, then I've got to always be the student. But I guess for me, for clients that want to work with me and do work with me, they want somebody who is, I guess, human, normal, and honest, and isn't saying it's okay, we can get through this because nothing bothers us. It's saying things bother us, but we'll still get through, because 100%. I will help you find ways to do that.
Yeah, 100%. Well, you've been so generous with your time, and I'm gonna put this out there, and it's just been fantastic. So people can find you where exactly?
So you can either get in touch with me at so it's www.kimadele.org, or I'm also on most social media, either as Kim Adele 10 is like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and LinkedIn, I'm Kim Adele Platts. And I would love to connect with you. And if anybody wants to chat, just give me a call.
Super.
Thanks for listening to Positive Personal Power. Do subscribe via your favorite podcasting app, and please leave us a 5-star review. Or sign up on our website, positivepersonalpower.net, for weekly emails and updates, and do share our episodes with your friends and on social media. Feel free to reach out anytime.